Imagine you are owning a construction company business. You buy a couple of shiny excavator trucks, put on a hard hat, bid on a multi-million-dollar commercial project, win it, and suddenly feel like a real estate titan in the making. But here's the strange part. Construction is an industry that quite literally builds the physical world around us: roads, bridges, skyscrapers, hospitals, housing developments, generating over $2 trillion in economic output in the U.S. alone every single year. And yet, it has the highest failure rate of almost any business sector on the planet. Over 60% of construction businesses fail within their first 5 years, and the ones that survive operate on margins so razor-thin that a single unexpected rainstorm, an unmapped pipe in the dirt, or a delayed payment check from a developer can instantly bankrupt an operation that spent 20 years building up its reputation. Look, by the end of this video, you are going to know exactly how that's even mathematically possible, how money actually flows in and out of a job site, why winning a massive bid is often the absolute worst thing that can happen to a contractor, and why a construction business isn't really a construction company at all. It's actually a high-stakes, undercapitalized financing firm disguised as heavy machinery. Now, before you go out and buy a fleet of dump trucks, you have to realize that construction companies come in 3 completely different operational models, and they are essentially 3 entirely different financial animals. First, you have the small, localized trade contractors. Think specialized electrical, plumbing, HVAC, or residential framing operations. A setup like this costs anywhere from $50,000 to $250,000 to get off the ground, mostly tied up in work vans, specialized tooling, licensing, and fundamental insurance policies. They run relatively lean, hit annual top-line revenue between $500,000 and $2 million, and rely on quick job turnover to keep cash moving through the bank account. Second, you have medium-sized general contractors doing custom residential subdivisions or regional commercial projects like strip malls and school extensions. Getting into this space requires $500,000 to $2 million in upfront capital just to handle mandatory bonding requirements, dedicated project managers, office staff, and heavy equipment leases. These companies pull in $5 million to $25 million in top-line revenue. And then, at the top of the food chain, you have massive civil and commercial contractors, the megatitans building interstate highways, suspension bridges, and 50-story glass towers. Entering this league requires tens of millions of dollars in liquid cash reserves just to clear the legal, regulatory, and insurance hurdles required to place a single bid. Their revenue hits hundreds of millions, but as you'll see in a minute, more money in this space definitely means a whole lot more problems. To understand why so many contractors end up broke despite looking rich, you have to break down the actual mechanics of a construction quote. Imagine a contractor bids on a project for $10 million. On paper, that sounds like a life-changing payday. But let's slice up where every single dollar of that $10 million goes. First, you have direct costs, also known in the industry as cost of goods sold. These are the expenses directly tied to driving nails into wood, pouring concrete, and assembling structural steel. Materials take a giant, unforgiving bite out of that total. Lumber, rebar, pipes, concrete, and roofing swallow up roughly 40% to 45% of the total contract, or $4.5 million right off the top. Next comes direct labor. You aren't just paying the workers base hourly wages, you are paying payroll taxes, union dues, high-risk workers' compensation insurance, and localized benefits. That absorbs another 25% to 30%, or about $3 million. Then comes heavy equipment. Whether you buy, lease, or rent bulldozers, excavators, and tower cranes, equipment costs, diesel fuel, transportation fees, and field maintenance account for another 8% to 10%, or roughly $900,000. So, before the construction company even pays its front office rent, buys software licenses, or pays its executive team, $8.4 million of that $10 million bid is completely wiped out. That leaves a gross profit of just $1.6 million, or a 16% gross margin. But we aren't anywhere close to done yet. Now comes indirect costs, or general overhead. You have to maintain a corporate headquarters, hire estimators to bid on 20 jobs just to win one, pay legal counsel, run accounting teams, and buy massive general liability insurance policies. Overhead routinely swallows 10% to 12% of total project revenue. That takes away another $1.1 million from our initial pile of cash. Do the math, and what's left over at the very end is the company's net profit margin. For the average general contractor, net margins sit between an agonizing 2% and 5%. On a $10 million project, if absolutely everything goes perfectly, the weather is sunny, materials arrive right on schedule, no one gets injured, supply chains don't break, and subcontractors don't mess up, the owner might walk away with $300,000 to $500,000 in actual net profit. But here's the kicker. In construction, things never go completely according to plan. Here is the thing about how money actually flows into a construction business. It doesn't flow in when you need it. It flows in on a massive, painful delay. This is where the real trap lies, and it's called the cash flow execution gap. In most traditional industries, when a customer wants a product, they pay for it up front or at the exact moment of delivery. If you buy a laptop, the manufacturer gets your money before you open the box. In construction, the entire process is inverted. The contractor acts as an uncredentialed bank for the project owner. When a job starts, the contractor has to spend cash out of pocket immediately for materials, hire workers, fuel up trucks, and mobilize crews on day one. But the contractor usually can't even submit their first progress billing invoice until 30 days into the job. Then, the client takes another 30, 60, or even 90 days to process that payment. That means a contractor is routinely funding 60 to 120 days of heavy payroll and material expenses entirely out of their own bank accounts or high-interest credit lines before seeing a single dime of reimbursement. And it gets even crazier because of a legal mechanism called retainage. In almost every major commercial construction contract, the client holds back 5% to 10% of every single progress payment until the entire building is finished, inspected, and issued a certificate of occupancy. Think about that for a second. If a company's total profit margin on a project is 4%, but the client is holding back 10% of the cash until the final walkthrough 2 years later, the contractor's entire profit, and a huge chunk of their own operational cash, is locked away in someone else's bank account. They are literally working at a deep net loss for the entire multi-year life cycle of the build, waiting for that final retainage check just to break even and turn a modest profit. So how do successful construction companies keep their head above water while playing this psychological and financial game of chicken? They use very specific operational strategies to protect their downside. The smartest operators treat bidding and estimating not like simple arithmetic, but like high-level risk management. They build contingency clauses directly into their contracts. If the global market price of structural steel or lumber jumps by 30% mid-project due to international supply chain shocks, standard fixed-price contracts would force the contractor to eat that extra cost entirely. Top-tier operators negotiate price escalation clauses that pass those commodity spikes onto the developer or building owner. They also master the art of subcontractor management. General contractors don't usually employ every tradesperson on site. They hire specialized subcontractors for electrical, plumbing, drywall, and roofing. They protect their cash flow by structuring pay-when-paid or pay-if-paid contracts with those subs, meaning the subcontractor only gets paid after the project owner pays the general contractor. It effectively pushes the financial risk down the structural ladder to smaller niche players. Another key retention and survival strategy is balancing their project portfolio between private sector work and public infrastructure. Private contracts, like building luxury high-rises or commercial shopping centers, usually offer higher profit margins, but developers can go bankrupt or freeze payments when the general economy hits a bump. Public works, like building public schools, municipal water treatment facilities, or state highways, offer much tighter margins, but government entities always pay their bills eventually. Successful contractors keep a baseline of low-margin public work running constantly just to keep cash moving through the bank account and cover daily overhead, while using private contracts to generate actual enterprise value. Yet, despite guaranteed math and tight risk controls on paper, construction companies fall like dominoes every single time the macroeconomy shifts. Why? The number one killer of construction businesses isn't a lack of work. Paradoxically, it's actually having too much work. It's called hyper-expansion, or growing your business to death. Imagine a contractor comfortably doing $5 million in annual revenue with $500,000 in liquid cash reserves. They bid aggressively on several massive projects at once and suddenly land 3 huge contracts, jumping their project pipeline overnight to $20 million. It feels like a massive victory, right? Wrong. To pull off $20 million worth of work, they suddenly need 4 times as many workers, 4 times as much raw material, and massive fleet upgrades. Because of that 60 to 120-day payment delay we talked about earlier, their cash outlay skyrockets overnight. Their $500,000 in savings gets completely vaporized in week 3 trying to meet weekly payroll obligations. If a single developer delays a progress payment by 2 weeks due to a bank processing issue, the contractor can't pay their workers or suppliers. The trade unions walk off the job site shuts down, default penalties kick in, and a business that looked insanely successful on paper goes bankrupt in real life before ever seeing the profit from those bids. The second common reason for total failure is the dreaded, disputed change order. When a project encounters unknown site conditions, like digging into the ground and striking unmapped bedrock, old foundations, or buried environmental hazards, the work stalls. The contractor spends cash solving the problem immediately to keep crews working, expecting the client to sign off on a change order paying them for the extra labor and heavy machinery. But if the client refuses to approve the change order or fights it legally, that money comes straight out of the contractor's thin margin. 2 major disputed change orders on a single large project can wipe out 5 years of accumulated company profits in a flash. So, is owning a construction company actually worth the extreme operational stress and financial risk? Let's walk through the realistic payoff scenarios depending on how well the business is structured and executed. In a failure scenario, an inexperienced owner underbids jobs just to land contracts, fails to monitor real-time cash flow, runs out of working capital during a minor 2-week weather delay, and ends up in bankruptcy court with material suppliers repossessing equipment and taking personal assets leveraged as loan collateral. In a baseline survival scenario, a contractor generates $10 million in top-line revenue, maintains tight control over overhead, survives the cash flow cycles, and lands right on that industry average 3% net profit margin. That nets the business owner $300,000 in actual profit. It provides a solid, comfortable living, but leaves very little margin for error if the housing or commercial real estate market takes a downturn. However, in an optimized payoff scenario, a master operator specializes in a high-barrier niche, like data center construction, specialized medical infrastructure, or complex marine engineering where competition is low and technical expertise is mandatory. By leveraging specialized knowledge and reputation, they command 8% to 12% net margins instead of 3%. On $30 million in annual volume, that optimized company generates $2.4 million to $3.6 million in pure net profit every year. It's built on a foundation of recurring corporate clients, ironclad price escalation contracts, and a massive cash reserve that lets them buy up failing competitors' equipment for pennies on the dollar during economic recessions. At the end of the day, owning a construction business isn't about being the best builder in town or having the biggest trucks. It's about being a master of cash flow timing, legal risk mitigation, and financial patience. The real wealth isn't made by holding a hammer, it's made by controlling the razor-thin margins between incoming cash and outgoing liabilities.